7 years ago, I did something that most beekeepers think is either brilliant or completely insane. I bought 3 identical packages of bees from the same supplier. Same genetics, same queen quality, same population size. And I installed 1 package into a Langstroth hive, 1 into a Warre hive, and 1 into a top bar hive. All 3 hives sat in the same row on my farm. Same sun exposure, same forage, same climate. Same beekeeper taking care of all 3. I wanted to answer the question that every single new beekeeper asks and that the internet argues about endlessly. Which hive is the best? And I wanted to answer it not with opinions, not with theory, not with what I read in a book, but with 2 full years of side-by-side data from real colonies managed by the same hands on the same piece of land. I weighed honey harvests, I counted winter losses, I timed my inspections, I tracked bee behavior. I recorded everything in a journal that I still have sitting in my kitchen drawer. And at the end of those 2 years, I had an answer. But it was not the answer I expected. It was not the answer the internet wanted to hear. And it is not the answer you are probably expecting right now. If you want to know which hive is truly best, and more importantly, which hive is best for you specifically, stay with me for the next 20 minutes because I am going to share every single thing those 2 years taught me. Welcome back to the channel. I am May Holloway, and before we dive in, I want to set the ground rules for this video. Rule number 1, I am not here to sell you a hive. I have no sponsorship from any hive manufacturer. I have no affiliate links. I have no financial reason to tell you that one hive is better than another. What I have is 2 years of comparative data and 20 years of total beekeeping experience, and I am going to share all of it with you as honestly as I possibly can. Rule number 2, everything I tell you about hive design and bee biology is backed by published research. I will put every source in the description below so you can read the science yourself and draw your own conclusions. I believe that is what you deserve. Rule number 3, at the end of this video, I am going to tell you which hive I personally chose to keep using and why. But I am also going to explain why your choice might be completely different from mine and why that is not just okay, it is exactly how it should be. Because the best hive is not a universal truth. The best hive is the one that fits your body, your budget, your goals, and your philosophy about what beekeeping means to you. Now let me start with the hive that most of you have already heard of, and that dominates commercial beekeeping across the entire Western world. The Langstroth hive was patented in 1851 by Reverend Lorenzo Lorraine Langstroth, a minister and beekeeper from Philadelphia who made one single discovery that changed beekeeping forever. He discovered what we now call bee space. Bee space is the precise gap between 6 and 9 millimeters that bees will leave open as a passageway rather than filling it with comb or propolis. Any gap smaller than 6 millimeters they seal with propolis. Any gap larger than 9 millimeters they fill with comb. But that sweet spot in between, they leave it open. According to research documented by Dr. Eva Crane in her comprehensive work, The World History of Beekeeping and Honey Hunting, Langstroth was not the first person to observe this phenomenon, but he was the first to design an entire hive system around it. Every frame in a Langstroth hive is built to maintain bee space on all sides. This means every frame is removable. Every frame can be inspected individually. Every frame can be moved from one hive to another. This single design principle, removable frames with consistent bee space, is what made modern beekeeping possible. Before Langstroth, beekeepers had to destroy their colonies to harvest honey. After Langstroth, they could take the honey and leave the bees alive. The standard Langstroth hive today consists of a bottom board, 1 or 2 deep hive bodies that hold the brood nest, medium or shallow supers stacked on top for honey storage, an inner cover, and a telescoping outer cover. The frames hang vertically inside each box on a ledge called a frame rest. Standard deep frames are 9 1/4 inches tall. Medium frames are 6 1/4 inches. The entire system is modular. You add boxes as the colony grows and remove them when you harvest. It is engineered for efficiency and scalability. Commercial operations running thousands of hives almost exclusively use Langstroth because of that modularity and because equipment is completely standardized and interchangeable. You can buy a frame in Georgia and it will fit a hive body made in Oregon. Parts are available everywhere. Knowledge is available everywhere. If you have a problem with a Langstroth hive, you can find 50 videos and 100 forum posts about your exact situation in under 5 minutes. That ecosystem of support is something the other two hive types simply cannot match. According to data from the USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service, over 90% of managed honeybee colonies in the United States are housed in Langstroth equipment. That number alone tells you something important about the practical reliability of this design. But popularity does not automatically mean superiority. And my 2 years of running a Langstroth alongside a Warre and a top bar taught me exactly where this hive shines and where it struggles in ways that surprised me. Here is what I found running my Langstroth side by side with the other two hives for 2 full seasons. Let me start with honey production because that is what most people want to know first. In year 1, my Langstroth colony produced 62 pounds of surplus honey. That is honey beyond what I left for the bees to overwinter on. 62 pounds from a first-year colony is excellent, well above the average that the University of Georgia Extension Service reports for managed colonies in the southeastern United States, which is typically between 30 and 60 pounds in a good year. In year 2, the same colony, now fully established with a strong overwintered population, produced 91 pounds of surplus honey. That is significant. 91 pounds. Remember those numbers because we are going to compare them with the Warre and the top bar later. Now inspections. I timed every single inspection I did across all 3 hive types during those 2 years because I wanted real data, not just feelings about how long things took. My average full inspection of the Langstroth took 22 minutes. That includes smoking, removing the outer and inner covers, pulling each frame, examining both sides, checking for queen cells, checking the brood pattern, assessing honey stores, replacing everything, and closing up. 22 minutes. The Langstroth is designed for inspection efficiency, and it delivers on that promise. Frames slide out cleanly. The bee space keeps everything organized. You can work through 10 frames systematically and know the complete status of your colony in under half an hour. Winter survival. Both winters my Langstroth colony survived. I wrapped the hive with a moisture quilt on top and an entrance reducer at the bottom. Standard practice. No losses. The colony came through strong both times with a solid cluster and adequate stores. Now here is where it gets honest. The Langstroth has real downsides that nobody in the Langstroth fan club wants to talk about. Weight. A full, deep Langstroth super filled with honey weighs approximately 60 to 70 pounds. I am a strong woman, but lifting 70 pounds above my head to stack supers is hard on my back, and it has gotten harder every year as I have gotten older. Research from the University of Minnesota Bee Lab has documented that ergonomic strain is one of the leading causes of beekeeper injuries and the primary reason that many older beekeepers eventually reduce their operations or quit entirely. The second downside, cost. My complete Langstroth setup, including the bottom board, 2 deep brood boxes, 2 medium honey supers, frames, foundation, inner cover, outer cover, and all hardware cost me approximately $320 at the time. Today, that same setup runs closer to $400 depending on the supplier. That is not cheap for a beginner who does not yet know if beekeeping is something they want to commit to long term. And third, the Langstroth encourages a style of beekeeping that is very hands-on, very interventionist. You are opening the hive regularly, you are managing space actively, you are adding supers, removing supers, reversing brood boxes, checking for swarm cells, monitoring mite loads with alcohol washes. It is a high-involvement system, and for some people, especially people who came to beekeeping because they wanted a quieter, more observational relationship with nature, that level of intervention feels wrong. It felt a little wrong to me sometimes too. I loved the honey. I loved the efficiency. But there were mornings when I walked out to my Langstroth and thought, am I keeping bees or am I managing a production facility? That question sat in the back of my mind for a long time, and it is part of the reason I decided to try the Warre. The Warre hive was designed by a French monk named Émile Warre, who spent decades studying bee behavior in natural settings before publishing his book Beekeeping for All in 1943. Warre called his design the People's Hive because he wanted it to be simple enough for anyone to build, affordable enough for anyone to afford, and natural enough that the bees could live in a way that closely resembled how they would live in a hollow tree in the wild. The philosophy behind the Warre is fundamentally different from the Langstroth. Where the Langstroth says, we will design the hive for the beekeeper's convenience, the Warre says, we will design the hive for the bee's preference and the beekeeper will adapt. The Warre hive consists of square boxes, typically 300 millimeters internal width, stacked vertically. Each box contains top bars, but no full frames and no foundation. The bees build their own natural comb hanging down from the top bars. There are no frame rests. No wire, no wax foundation sheets, just wooden bars and whatever the bees decide to build on them. The most distinctive feature of the Warre is how it expands. Instead of adding boxes on top like a Langstroth, you add boxes on the bottom, a technique called nadiring. The logic behind this comes directly from observing how bees build in nature. In a hollow tree, bees start building comb at the top and build downward. The oldest comb and the honey stores end up at the top. The newest comb and the active brood nest moves downward as the colony grows. By adding boxes underneath, the Warre mimics this natural downward building pattern. The brood nest moves down into fresh space while the honey accumulates above in older comb. When you harvest, you take the top box, which contains the oldest comb and the most honey, exactly as bees would naturally abandon their oldest comb in a large tree cavity. According to research published by Dr. Thomas Seeley in his study of feral bee colonies living in trees in the Arnott Forest near Ithaca, New York, the natural nest cavity preferred by wild honeybees has an internal volume of approximately 40 liters. A standard 3-box Warre hive has an internal volume very close to this, significantly smaller than a fully stacked Langstroth, which can exceed 100 liters with honey supers. Seeley's research suggests that bees in smaller cavities, more closely matching their evolutionary preference, tend to exhibit certain advantages in disease resistance and thermoregulation, though this remains an area of active scientific debate. The Warre also features a unique element called the quilt box, a shallow box filled with wood shavings or straw that sits between the top bars of the uppermost box and the roof. The quilt box absorbs moisture rising from the cluster and allows it to evaporate gradually through the roof rather than condensing and dripping back down onto the bees. Moisture, not cold, is the #1 killer of honeybee colonies in winter, according to research from the University of Minnesota Bee Lab. The Warre's built-in moisture management system addresses this problem elegantly at the design level, rather than requiring the beekeeper to add it as an afterthought. When I first read about the Warre, I thought I had found the perfect hive. Natural comb, minimal intervention, built-in moisture control. A design philosophy that respected the bees' evolutionary preferences. It sounded like everything I wanted. And then I actually used one for 2 years. My Warre was beautiful. I built it myself from plans I found online, and it cost me about $140 in materials, less than half of what I spent on the Langstroth setup. The wood was simple pine. The construction was straightforward. I had it built in a weekend with basic tools. That affordability and simplicity is real, and it matters, especially for beginners who are not sure yet whether beekeeping is for them. The bees took to it immediately. Within a week, they were building gorgeous natural comb, perfectly white, curved, and organic in a way that foundation comb in a Langstroth never quite matches. There is something genuinely beautiful about watching bees build comb exactly the way they want to build it, with no human template dictating the cell size or structure. Research from the Journal of Apicultural Research has shown that bees building natural comb construct a mix of worker cells and drone cells in ratios that they determine based on colony needs, a flexibility that pre-stamped foundation does not allow. In a Langstroth with standard foundation, the bees are essentially forced to build worker-sized cells almost exclusively because that is what the foundation template provides. In the Warre, they choose. And watching them choose was one of the most fascinating parts of the experiment. Now, the reality check. Honey production year 1. My Warre produced 31 pounds of surplus honey. Remember, the Langstroth gave me 62. Half. Exactly half. I told myself year 1 is not a fair comparison. The bees had to build all their own comb from scratch with no foundation to guide them, while the Langstroth bees had a head start with drawn comb and foundation. Fair point. Year 2, the Warre produced 44 pounds. Better, but still less than half of the Langstroth's 91 pounds. And this is consistent with what the research predicts. A study from the National Bee Unit in the United Kingdom found that colonies on natural comb typically produce 20 to 40% less surplus honey than colonies on foundation comb because the bees invest significantly more energy and resources into wax production. Building comb from scratch requires bees to consume approximately 6 to 7 pounds of honey to produce a single pound of beeswax, according to research published in the Journal of Economic Entomology. That energy cost is substantial, and it comes directly out of your surplus honey yield. Inspections, and this is where the Warre frustrated me the most. My average inspection time was 43 minutes, nearly double the Langstroth. Why? Because the combs are not in removable frames. They are attached to top bars, and the bees build them the way they want, which means they frequently attach comb to the walls of the box, build cross comb connecting multiple bars, or create curved comb that does not lift out cleanly. Every inspection involved carefully cutting attachments with a knife, gently prying bars apart, and praying that the comb did not break and fall into the box, which happened to me 4 times over 2 years. Broken comb is a mess. It kills brood, it floods the bottom of the hive with honey, it agitates the bees, and it takes significant time to clean up. Beyond the mechanical difficulty, there is a philosophical tension in the Warre that I struggled with. The design philosophy says minimal intervention. Warre himself recommended inspecting only twice a year. But modern beekeeping science, and in most states modern beekeeping law, requires regular monitoring for diseases and pests, particularly Varroa destructor. You cannot responsibly monitor Varroa mite loads in a hive you only open twice a year. And performing an alcohol wash mite test in a Warre is significantly more complex than in a Langstroth, because you cannot simply pull a frame of brood and shake 300 bees into a jar. You have to cut comb and work around fragile natural attachments. I loved the Warre's philosophy. I loved the beauty of natural comb. I loved the affordability and simplicity of construction. But after 2 years, I had to honestly ask myself, is this hive practical for a beekeeper who takes disease management and colony health monitoring seriously? For me, the answer was no. For someone who wants a low-intervention observation hive and is willing to accept lower honey yields and limited inspection capability, the Warre can be wonderful. But that someone was not me. Now let me tell you about the hive that surprised me the most. The top bar hive is the oldest hive design still in active use. Variations of horizontal top bar hives have been used in Africa and parts of Asia for centuries, long before Langstroth or Warre ever put pen to paper. The modern version commonly used in the United States and Europe is based on the Kenyan top bar hive design, developed in the 1970s by Dr. Maurice Smith and colleagues as part of a Canadian International Development Agency project to bring affordable beekeeping technology to East Africa. The principle is radically simple. A long horizontal trough, typically between 3 and 4 feet long, shaped like a trapezoid in cross-section, with wooden bars resting across the top. No boxes, no stacking, no lifting. The bees build natural comb hanging down from each bar, just like in the Warre, but instead of building downward through vertically stacked boxes, They build outward along the length of the trough. The brood nest typically occupies the center of the hive, with honey stores extending outward toward both ends. You manage the colony by sliding bars apart and working horizontally rather than lifting boxes vertically. This single feature, horizontal management, is what makes the top bar hive genuinely life-changing for certain beekeepers. According to an accessibility study published by the International Bee Research Association, the top bar hive is the most ergonomically accessible hive design currently available. There is no heavy lifting, ever. The heaviest thing you will ever move is a single top bar with comb attached, which weighs between 2 and 5 pounds. For beekeepers with back problems, arthritis, limited upper body strength, wheelchair users, elderly beekeepers, or anyone who simply cannot or does not want to lift 60-pound supers, the top bar hive removes the single biggest physical barrier to beekeeping. The cost is also remarkable. Because the design is a simple trough with no standardized frames, no foundation, and no specialized hardware, a top bar hive can be built from scrap lumber for under $50, or even constructed from repurposed materials for nearly nothing. I have seen functional top bar hives built from old dresser drawers, wine barrels, and 55-gallon drums cut in half. The philosophy of the top bar hive sits somewhere between the Langstroth and the Warre. It allows natural comb building like the Warre, but it also allows individual comb inspection. You can pull one bar at a time and examine the comb on both sides, which gives you much more management capability than the Warre without the weight and complexity of the Langstroth. It is a compromise design, and like all compromises, it does some things beautifully and other things not as well. My 2 years with the top bar taught me exactly where those boundaries are. I built my top bar hive for $63. I used pine boards from the hardware store and cut the trapezoidal sides on my table saw in an afternoon. The bars are just straight pieces of wood with a strip of wax starter glued to the underside to guide the bees in building straight comb. Total construction time, about 5 hours. It was the easiest and cheapest hive I have ever built, and honestly, it was the most satisfying to construct because the design is so elegant in its simplicity. The bees moved in and started building immediately. Natural comb, beautiful, white, organic, just like the Warre. But here is where the top bar immediately showed its advantage over the Warre. The combs hung straight down from individual bars, and because the hive is open from the top rather than stacked, I could pull one bar at a time and inspect individual combs without disturbing the rest of the colony. No cutting attachments from box walls. No worrying about cross-comb between stacked boxes. The comb occasionally attached to the sides of the trough, especially in hot weather when the wax softened, but it was far less problematic than the Warre's cross-comb issues. Inspection time, average 28 minutes, faster than the Warre's 43, slower than the Langstroth's 22, a reasonable middle ground. Honey production, and this is where things get interesting. Year 1, my top bar produced 27 pounds of surplus honey, the lowest of all 3 hives. I was not surprised. Natural comb, first-year colony, significant energy invested in wax production. Year 2, 36 pounds, better but still the lowest. Here is why. The top bar hive has a fixed volume. Unlike the Langstroth, where you can add supers indefinitely as the colony grows, the top bar has a set number of bars and a set amount of internal space. My hive had 30 bars. That is it. No expansion possible. The bees filled it and then they had nowhere else to go. This volume limitation has 2 consequences. First, lower maximum honey yield because there is simply less storage space available compared to a fully stacked Langstroth. Second, higher swarming tendency. When the hive is full, the bees' natural response is to swarm. My top bar colony attempted to swarm 3 times in year 2. 3 times. My Langstroth attempted once. My Warre did not attempt at all, possibly because its smaller cavity size more closely matched the bees' evolutionary preference and they felt less urgency to reproduce. The swarming issue is the top bar's biggest weakness, and it is well documented. Research from the University of Guelph in Ontario found that horizontal hive designs with fixed volume showed significantly higher swarming rates compared to vertically expandable designs, particularly in regions with strong nectar flows where colonies grow rapidly. Now, the things I loved. The ergonomics are everything the advocates promise. I never lifted more than 4 pounds during any inspection. My back never hurt, my shoulders never ached. I could inspect my top bar on days when my Langstroth supers would have been too heavy for me to manage alone. For a beekeeper in her 50s, with 2 decades of wear on her body, that matters more than I can express in words. The observation window. I installed a plexiglass window on one side of my top bar hive, and it changed my relationship with that colony completely. I could walk up any morning, kneel down, look through the window, and see the bees without opening the hive. I could watch them building comb. I could see the cluster size. I could observe their behavior and mood without a single puff of smoke. Research from Dr. Juliana Rangel at Texas A&M University has documented that reduced hive disturbance correlates with lower stress pheromone levels and improved colony health outcomes. My top bar, the hive I disturbed least, was consistently the calmest and most gentle colony of the 3. The bees in that hive were noticeably more tolerant of my presence than the bees in either the Langstroth or the Warre. Whether that was the observation window, the horizontal design, or simply the genetics of that particular queen, I cannot say with certainty. But I noticed it clearly and consistently across both seasons. The top bar hive is not for everyone. If your primary goal is maximum honey production, it will disappoint you. If you live in an area with a strong nectar flow and aggressive swarming genetics, you will fight swarm management constantly. But if you want an affordable, accessible, gentle introduction to beekeeping that lets you observe and learn without heavy lifting and without spending hundreds of dollars before you know whether you even enjoy this, the top bar is hard to beat. I genuinely believe that more beginners should start with a top bar hive than currently do. And I say that as someone whose primary hive is not a top bar. Now let me bring everything together because I know this is what you have been waiting for. 2 years, 3 hives, 1 farm, same bees, same beekeeper. Here are the numbers side by side, and I want you to pay attention not just to which hive won each category, but to why it won and what that means for your specific situation. Honey production over 2 years combined. Langstroth, 153 pounds total surplus. Warre, 75 pounds total surplus. Top bar, 63 pounds total surplus. The Langstroth produced more than double the Warre and nearly 2.5 times the top bar. If honey production is your primary goal, and for many beekeepers it is, the Langstroth wins this category decisively, and the research supports it. The University of Georgia Extension Service data on managed colony yields consistently shows that colonies on drawn foundation comb in standard Langstroth equipment outperform natural comb hives by significant margins. Average inspection time. Langstroth, 22 minutes. Top bar, 28 minutes. Warre, 43 minutes. The Langstroth wins again, but the top bar is surprisingly close. The Warre's inspection time was nearly double the Langstroth, and the physical difficulty of those inspections, cutting cross comb, managing fragile natural attachments, working vertically through stacked boxes without frames, made it feel even longer than 43 minutes on difficult days. Construction cost at the time of my experiment. Top bar, $63. Warre, $140. Langstroth, $320. The top bar wins this category by a massive margin. And today those gaps have only widened. A complete Langstroth setup now runs close to $400, while a top bar can still be built from scrap lumber for under $50. Weight of heaviest component during regular management. Top bar, 4 pounds per bar maximum. Warre, approximately 35 pounds per box. Langstroth, 60 to 70 pounds per full, deep super. If you have any physical limitation, any back issue, any concern about lifting, the top bar wins this category so decisively that it is not even a contest. The Langstroth is the heaviest hive system in common use, and that weight is not optional. You have to lift those supers to manage the colony. Winter survival over 2 winters. Langstroth survived both winters. Warre survived both winters. Top bar survived year 1, lost the colony in year 2 due to late season swarming that left the remaining population too small to overwinter successfully. 1 loss out of 6 total colony winters across all 3 hives. The top bar's fixed volume and resulting swarming tendency directly contributed to that loss. A late August swarm took half the population at a time when there was not enough season remaining for the colony to rebuild to winter strength. Swarming attempts over 2 years. Langstroth, 1 attempt. Warre, 0 attempts. Top bar, 3 attempts. The Warre's smaller cavity volume and natural comb architecture appeared to reduce swarming motivation, which aligns with Dr. Seeley's research on feral colony nest cavity preferences. The top bar's fixed horizontal volume created consistent congestion pressure that triggered repeated swarming behavior. Disease and pest management capability. Langstroth, excellent. Removable standardized frames make Varroa monitoring, alcohol washes, and treatment applications straightforward and efficient. Warre, poor. Natural comb on top bars and stacked boxes makes mite monitoring extremely difficult and treatment application complicated. Top bar, moderate. Individual bars can be removed for inspection, but natural comb fragility and non-standard dimensions make some standard monitoring techniques harder to apply. Beginner friendliness. This is subjective, but after 2 years of running all 3 simultaneously, I rank them this way. Top bar first. Affordable, no heavy lifting, observation window available, individual comb inspection possible, gentle on mistakes because the scale is smaller. Langstroth second. Most support resources available, standardized equipment, predictable behavior, but expensive to start and physically demanding. Warre third. Beautiful philosophy, but difficult inspections, limited disease monitoring capability, and the minimal intervention approach can leave beginners without the feedback they need to learn. I know that ranking will upset some people, and I respect that. Every beekeeper develops a personal relationship with their hive type, and that relationship is valid regardless of what my data shows. But I promised you honesty, and these are my honest conclusions from 2 years of careful observation. Now, if this video is helping you make your decision, and you appreciate the time I put into this kind of research, take 1 second right now and drop a comment below telling me which hive you are leaning toward. I read every single comment, and I will respond to as many as I can. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is the kind of deep, honest content I put out every single week. So which hive do I use today? Langstroth. 14 of them. Every single one is a Langstroth. After the 2-year experiment, I returned to Langstroth as my primary hive system, and I have stayed with it ever since. Here is why, and then I am going to tell you why that might be completely irrelevant to your decision. I chose Langstroth because my goals are specific. I want to produce meaningful quantities of honey to sell locally and give to friends and family. I want to manage Varroa aggressively with regular monitoring and evidence-based treatment. I want to be able to split my hives efficiently to grow my apiary. I want standardized, interchangeable equipment so I can swap frames between hives when a colony needs support. And I need the massive ecosystem of knowledge and community that exists around Langstroth management, because even after 20 years, I am still learning and I still have questions. For those goals, the Langstroth is unmatched. But here is what I need you to hear very clearly. If your goals are different from mine, your hive should be different from mine. If you are 68 years old with a bad back and you want 2 hives in your garden so you can watch the bees and harvest a few jars of honey for your grandchildren, the top bar is your hive. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. If you live on a remote property and you want bees that manage themselves with minimal intervention, and you are comfortable with lower yields in exchange for a more natural relationship with your colonies, the Warre might be exactly what you are looking for. If you are a young, strong person who wants to eventually run 50 hives and sell honey at the farmer's market, start with Langstroth because the scalability and equipment standardization will matter enormously as you grow. The hive does not make the beekeeper. The beekeeper makes the choice. And the right choice is the one that fits your life, not mine, not the internet's, not some stranger in a forum who has never met you and does not know your situation. I ran all three. I measured all three. I loved things about all three. And if I had to pick one word to describe each hive based on 2 years of intimate experience, it would be these: Langstroth, productive; Warre, philosophical; top bar, accessible. All three are valid. All three can keep bees alive and make honey and bring you the kind of quiet joy that only beekeeping can bring. Choose the one that sounds like you. So there it is. 2 years, 3 hives, 1 honest answer: there is no single best hive. There is only the best hive for you. Langstroth for production and scalability, Warre for natural philosophy and minimal intervention, top bar for accessibility and affordability. All the data is in this video. All the sources are in the description. The decision is yours. Next week, I am covering something that every beekeeper needs to master before the season gets ahead of them: 5 proven methods to prevent swarming. Swarm season is coming fast, and losing half your colony to a swarm you could have prevented is one of the most frustrating experiences in beekeeping. I'm going to show you 5 methods that actually work, not theories, not guesses, methods I have used successfully across 20 years and 14 hives, all backed by published research as always. Subscribe so you do not miss it, because that video could save your strongest colony this spring. Until then, whatever hive you choose it with confidence and take good care of your bees.